Taiwan, I'm Liao with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Kuomintang lawmakers are being criticized for a recent trip to China after the country's Coast Guard resumed patrols in Taiwan's restricted waters.
当然，两手策略也是绝对不会改变的。所谓两手策略，就是硬的更硬，软的更软。释放善意的话，他们会释放更多善意，但是在这个硬的部分，比如说包括军机包括这个海警这部分，我想大陆也不会停止的。
The patrols near Taiwan's outlying Kinmen Islands come less than a day after a group of opposition lawmakers returned from a goodwill trip to China. The group said the trip was a success and a step towards peace in the Taiwan Strait. China started patrols near the islands in February after the death of 2 Chinese nationals. They died when their vessel capsized while being pursued by Taiwan's Coast Guard. The Philippines has accused China of damaging one of its boats in the disputed Scarborough Shoal. That's after the Chinese Coast Guard fired water cannons at Philippine ships resupplying fishers there. Liao reports from the South China Sea.
Tensions between Beijing and Manila are simmering here in the South China Sea. That's after the Philippines has accused the China Coast Guard of blasting its ships with a water cannon on the Scarborough Shoal. That's a rich fishing ground here in the South China Sea, claimed by both countries, but in recent years it's been occupied by China. China says that it expelled Philippine fishing vessels from that area, whilst Philippines says that it stood its ground. China and the Philippines and its allies vie for power in these contested waters of the South China Sea. We've been seeing that firsthand. We're on board a Philippine Navy patrol vessel taking part in Balikatan exercises with the US. A Chinese Navy vessel here recently encroached on a live fire target practice, causing that exercise to be halted. In light of this recent news, the officers here on the Navy patrol vessel will likely be keeping an even keener eye on the Chinese vessels that have been shadowing these drills. Alex Chen and Liao in the South China Sea for TaiwanPlus.
U.S. officials say Beijing is distorting a UN resolution to endorse its One China principle and isolate Taiwan. The 1971 resolution recognized the People's Republic of China in Beijing as the UN's legitimate representative of China, removing representation from Taipei. The officials say China uses that resolution to claim that Taiwan is part of China with no independent status, a view Beijing sees as bound by international law. The U.S. officials say this is based on flawed legal assumptions and could be used by China to legally justify taking Taiwan by force.
Number 1, 2758 did not endorse, is not equivalent to, and does not reflect a consensus for China's One China principle. Number 2, 2758 has no bearing on countries' sovereign choices with respect to their relationships with Taiwan.
President-elect Ching-te has thanked Japan for being Taiwan's biggest donor following a major earthquake in early April. Liao made the comments at a meeting with visiting lawmakers from Japan's ruling party. He says Japan accounted for around 60% of all overseas donations after the magnitude 7.2 earthquake caused major damage on Taiwan's east coast. The meeting comes as Liao works to shore up international support for Taiwan ahead of his inauguration in May. Taiwan's state-of-the-art military training center has opened to the media for the first time. Tiffany Wong looks at how the country is turning to high-tech to prepare for the worst.
Preparing for disaster. Soldiers at Taiwan's National Defense Medical Center are trying to save these civilians from a simulated typhoon. This is the first glimpse media have gotten into the country's modern training grounds. This new type of tactical response training uses AI technology to help soldiers feel like they're in a real life-or-death situation and test their responses.
战场的第一现场，除了做敌火的压制，伤兵的一个自救互救之外，会将伤患脱离到一个相对安全的伤患收集点，再做一个初步的处置。处置完之后，才会送到我们所谓的后送载具去做后送到所谓的医疗院所。
The VR goggles visually immerse soldiers in disaster scenarios, and the props and dummies recreate the physical environment.
在荧幕里面，其实它会真实的呈现出有相关的爆裂物。那他们身上训员的身上也会穿戴所谓的电极贴片，所以到时候在有攻击的行为，你没有躲在适当的掩体的状况之下，你就会遭受微幅的电极量的电击，让学员知道说，这是一个不是单纯一个 game 的游戏这样子。
All this high-tech gadgetry is meant to put the trainees into as realistic scenarios as possible. But with some luck, the worst of these will stay firmly in the virtual world. Devin Tsai and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus.
A labor ministry survey has revealed the gender pay gap among recent university graduates in Taiwan has shrunk. The survey showed the average monthly salary of recent graduates in 2023 was around $1,070. On average, male graduates earned $1,130 per month, while female graduates earned $1,040 per month, an 8% difference. That's down from a more than 10% gap in 2022. The Labor Ministry says more male graduates work in higher paying fields such as information technology and engineering. The latest data shows that Taiwan's wealth gap has grown sharply over the past 30 years. The government says the wealthiest people hold far more assets than the poorest. John Van Trieste helps crunch the numbers and explain why.
For 55-year-old single mother Ms. Zhu, the fact that average household wealth in Taiwan is around $500,000 doesn't mean much. She's among the 71% of families that fall below this average. Some days, her sweet potato stand struggles to pull in even $30.
因为现在的利润不到一半，下雨天也不能卖，然后天气热，你看这样天气这么热，没生意啊。
Not all those who fall below the average are in quite such tough circumstances, but wealth inequality is a fact of Taiwanese society, and new government data shows it's grown greatly in recent decades. One way to see this is to compare the earnings gap between the richest 20% and the poorest 20% of society. In 1991, the richest made around 17 times more than the poorest, but by the end of 2021, that was up to 67 times more. Researchers say a person's occupation and economic trends factor into who rises in the wealth ratings and who falls behind.
During the pandemic in 2021, remote work opportunities boosted exports of electronic components and the manufacture and export of ICT equipment. But the service and other traditional industries focused on domestic demand performed very poorly. This is reflected in the growing income gap between workers in different sectors.
There are countries where the situation's worse. One way to see this is to look at what's known as the Gini coefficient, a number between 0 and 1 used to show how unequal a society is. 0 means perfect equality, while 1 means total inequality. With a 2021 score of 0.606, Taiwan is more equal than the UK, France, or Japan, to name a few examples. But back in 1991, Taiwan had a much lower score of 0.47. Taiwan's net and gross national wealth has risen even through the end of the pandemic. But there are still plenty of people in Taiwan, people like sweet potato vendor Ms. Zhu, who aren't benefiting from the country's overall prosperity. Eason Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's Environment Ministry is planning to place tighter restrictions on the particles that cause poor air quality in the country.
就是全亚洲最严格的，比日本、韩国都还要严格。分阶段来逐步加严。我们接下来如果12能够达标，那么未来会再继续加严。
The new rules restrict particle concentrations from the current limit of 15 micrograms per cubic meter. The ministry says this goal can be reached by 2030, but some environmental groups say the 12 microgram limit doesn't go far enough. PM 2.5 are tiny particles of soot or other matter that can get into the lungs and cause a range of health problems. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, take a look at this light show in the Italian Alps. The display aims to raise awareness of climate change. I'm Liao. Take care and see you next time.